So now let's move to the transmission parameters, or the T or ABCD parameters. So for the transmission parameters, V2 and I2 are the independent variables. We have V1 equal to AV2 minus VI2. Then our I1 is equal to AV2 minus VI2. My matrix form, this is V1 I1 equal to A, B, C, D times V2 and I2. This is negative I2. Negative I2 because the direction of the current in port 2 is going out. Solving for the T parameters. So for A and C, we need I2 to be 0 or port 2 is open. Our A equal to V1 over V2. Our I2 is equal to 0. And our D is equal to I1 over V2. I2 equal to 0. Now next, we need port 2 to be shorted so that V2 is equal to 0. If V2 is equal to 0, we can solve for B and D. Our B is equal to negative V1 over I2. And our D is equal to negative I1 over I2. This figure shows how to solve for the T parameters. First, we have I2 equals to 0, and then second, we have V2 equals to 0. We have an example: use impedances in the S domain and obtain the transmission parameters of the following circuit. So if this is in the S domain, converting this into S domain, we have 1 is 1 over S, is 1 over S, 1 over S, this is 1. First, let's label our V1, I1, V2, and I2. This is our I1, V1, our V2, then we have negative I2. So for A and C, we need to open our port 2, or our I2 is equal to 0. This is 0. So before solving for A and C, we need to get our ZEQ and this ZEQ. Now if you look at the circuit, these ZEQs are equal because we have 1 in parallel with 1 over S, and then we have 1 in parallel with 1 over S. So ZEQ just equal to 1 over S in parallel with 1. So this is 1 over S over 1 over S plus 1 is equal to 1 over S plus 1. So this circuit becomes, so this is our V2. Now V1 and I1. Now solving for A is equal to V1 over V2, where I2 equal to 0. Looking at the circuit, we can relate V2 and V1 by using VDT. By VDT, our V2 is just equal to our ZEQ is 1 over S plus 1 over ZEQ plus 1 over S. We have 1 over S plus 1 plus 1 over S times V1. So we have S over 2S plus 1. So our V1 over V2 equal to A equal to 2S plus 1 over S. Now solving for C is equal to I1 over V2. Now let's label the current in this branch as I. Then we can relate I and I1 by using CDT. By CDT, have I equal to this ZEQ. So we have 1 over S plus 1 over 2 over S plus 1 plus 1 over S times I1. We have our I is equal to S over 3S plus 1 times I1. Now by Ohm's law, our V2 just equal to ZEQ times I, or we have 1 over S plus 1 times I. Now our I is just equivalent to this one. So our V2 is equal to 1 over S plus 1 times S over 3S plus 1 times I1. So our I1 over V2 is equal to our C is equal to S plus 1 times 3S plus 1 over S. Now solving for B and D, our V2 is equal to 0. For our port 2 is shorted. Now if port 2 is shorted, we can simplify our circuit into this. Now solving for B, or B is just negative P1 over I2. Since these three branches are connected in parallel, so V1 is just equal to the voltage in each branch. So by Ohm's law, our V1 is equal to 1 over S times negative I2. So our negative V1 over I2 equal to B is 1 over S. Now solving for D, or D equal to negative I1 over I2. So we can relate I2 and I1 by using CDT. So we have three branches. So we use the general formula for CDT. So negative I2 is equal to S over S plus 1 times I1. So we have negative I1 over I2 is equal to, our D is equal to 2s plus 1 over s. Our t parameters have 2s plus 1 over s, and we have 1 over s. We have s plus 1 times 3s plus 1 over s. We have 2s plus 1 over s.